humor as a coping mechanism is one of the most widely disputed coping mechanisms that I can really think of. When it comes to physical harm coping mechanisms like self-harm, it is pretty much unanimously decided that it's not a healthy coping mechanism. However, when it comes to humor, it's widely debated whether that is appropriate and it should be continued, or if it should be offensive and ridiculed. I personally use humor as a coping mechanism because I think that, in all seriousness, everything's always serious all the time when it comes to mental health, for me at least. When I talk to my doctor about upping my prescription, that's serious. When I talk about my trauma and sexual assault and getting diagnosed with a new possible mental illness, that's serious. When I go into therapy every single Wednesday at noon, that's serious. But what I can control is when I can make it not serious. But people disagree with me on that topic a lot. I was making a joke on Yubo, which is not the greatest place to make jokes, apparently. And I made a joke that was probably in poor taste, I suppose. That was like, I'm gonna kill myself. Oh my god, these Sims aren't working, because I was playing The Sims. And someone said, mental illness shouldn't be joked about. It's an incredibly serious thing that affects a lot of people, which I'm affected by it. I get it. But I think that not allowing people to joke and cope in their own way is even more damaging than any joke about mental illness can get. Now, when I say that, I sound like an asshole, and I'm very aware that I sound like an asshole, right? Because when I say that joking about mental illness is fine, it makes it sound like anyone can just joke about mental illness. If you don't actually have a mental illness and your idea of a joke is telling people to kill themselves, that's not a joke. There's a difference. And I wanted to make that very clear. I am not condoning people who joke about mental illness. I think that is a whole nother problem in itself. But when we're talking about people who have been diagnosed with mental illness and have to deal with the seriousness and the weight of mental illness on an everyday basis, I think it's really absurd that we restrict people from expressing what little expression we can get. And even on like TikTok, which is supposed to be an app for like people to just go and find communities that they love and support, even when people make jokes about mental illness on there, a lot of the comments are always about like, I hate when people joke about this. Like, I hate when people joke about this. And in my opinion, that's how you find the people who aren't actually mentally ill. Now that's a bold statement, but let me explain. I always see people in the comments being like, wow, that's so funny, like, I relate a lot to that message. But then there's always those people that are like, this is not funny. I don't get this. I don't understand why people are, like, laughing at this. And that's because you don't get it. I think one of the biggest things that plagues people with mental illness are the people who fake it. Which is just absurd. I think it's very funny that people fake mental illness like it's like a trading card company. But that's for another day. But these people who fake mental illness go to the absolute biggest, craziest storylines where, like, I get really triggered when people joke about that. And I think that another unpopular opinion that I'm going to get yelled at for is that the real world doesn't really care about your triggers. And that's from someone who experiences getting triggered by certain things that make me have PTSD, like flashbacks. I understand triggers and emotional triggers that make you go into fight or flight. However, it should be you focusing on finding a way to calm yourself down and cope from that, rather than blaming the world about it. And so if humor and people's coping mechanisms triggers you, then find a way to fix that yourself. I work on it a lot. I work on a lot of breathing and a lot of meditation and a lot of mind stuff right now. That's what I'm working with, and that's what I'm working on. That's what me and my therapist have found that has worked the best for me. But it is an obvious trial and error. But I sound like a complete and utter, insensitive person when I say that the world really does not care about your triggers. I saw a trigger warning for eye contact the other day, and I am very sorry for anyone who struggles with eye contact and making eye contact. Just don't make eye contact. Just don't make eye contact. You know? The world is trying to make a safe place on TikTok, which I really appreciate, and I think that these people that are gathering in these communities that are trying to make as safe of a place for everybody as possible are amazing. But at a certain point, you have to understand that one thing will only trigger one person. And if other people's healthy coping mechanisms trigger you, that isn't anyone else's issue. That's something that you need to solve yourself. And if it's not about triggering you, and if it's not about that, and you just think it's offensive, unless it's an actually offensive, lock them up in the asylums, unless it's, actually offensive, let people live. I love that people are becoming more politically correct and becoming more politically aware. But some people push it so far that that's the reason that people trying to be politically correct are made fun of on the internet. Like social justice warriors. They are going to the very much extreme that no one else is trying to push. I saw another trigger warning for, I don't know, I think it was, water. I think it was, faucet. That's absurd. And that's why we as a community are made fun of for being snowflakes. You have to understand that while trigger warnings for self-harm, sexual abuse, very serious topics are fine, there are some things that we need to push away from as a society and push away from as a community that are getting us made fun of and in the not coping way. And I think that's the biggest issue that I have with the mental health discussion and topics, is that people won't. And I'll be the asshole. It's fine. I get it. Someone has to play devil's advocate. I just don't agree. I don't like it. I think that it makes people make fun of us so much easier. I think it hurts us more to shelter these people that really need to start working on their own inner peace and their own inner struggles and trauma than everyone else. So, controversial video alert. I don't think any of my other videos have been really controversial. They've been kind of human rights and human lives at stake. But this is probably one of the most controversial opinions that I've ever given out. So if you have any feedback, negative or positive, if you have any opinions to give about the copious amounts of trigger warnings and people yelling at people who are coping healthily, leave them in the comments. I will be glad to respond, and I'd love to hear anything about it. But besides that, that's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to talk about today. See y'all soon-ish.